relief. "That was close. It's hard to make so many people stay absolutely quiet for hour after hour. Especially the children. They don't understand." "We'll have to leave," Lake said. "Leave?" Barber asked. "We can make this stockade strong enough to hold out unicorns." "Look to the south," Lake told him. Barber did so, and saw what Lake had already seen, a broad, low cloud of dust moving slowly toward them. "Another herd of unicorns," Lake said. "John didn't know how they migrated. The Dunbar expedition wasn't here long enough to learn that. There'll be herd after herd coming through, and no time for us to strengthen the walls. We'll have to leave tonight." Preparations were made for the departure, preparations that consisted mainly of providing each person with as much in the way of food or supplies as he or she could carry. In the 1.5 gravity, that was not much. They left when the blue star rose. They filed out through the northern gate, and the rear guard closed it behind them. There was almost no conversation among them. Some of them turned to take a last look at what had been the only home they had ever known on Ragnarok. Then they all faced forward again, to the northwest, where the foothills of the plateau might offer them sanctuary. They found their sanctuary on the second day, a limestone ridge honeycombed with caves. Men were sent back at once to carry the food and supplies left in the stockade to the new home. They returned to report that the second herd of unicorns had broken down the walls and ripped the interior of the stockade into wreckage. Much of the food and supplies had been totally destroyed. Lake sent them back twice more to bring everything, down to the last piece of bent metal or torn cloth. They would find uses for all of it in the future. The cave system was extensive, containing room for several times their number. The deeper portions of the caves could not be lived in until ventilation ducts were made, but the outer caves were more than sufficient in number. Work was begun to clear them of fallen rubble, to pry down all loose material overhead, and to level the floors. A spring came out of the ridge not far from the caves, and the approach to the caves was so narrow and steep that unicorns could scramble up it only with difficulty, and one at a time. And should they ever reach the natural terrace in front of the caves, they would be too large to enter, and could do no more than stand outside and make targets of themselves for the bowmen within. Anders was in charge of making the caves livable, his working force restricted almost entirely to women and children. Lake sent Barber out, with a small detachment of men, to observe the woods goats and to learn what plants they ate, and then learn, by experimenting, if such plants could be safely eaten by humans. The need for salt would be tremendously increased when summer came. Having once experienced a saltless 2 weeks in the desert, Lake doubted that any of them could survive without it. All hunting parties, as well as Barber's party, were ordered to investigate all deposits that might contain salt, as well as any stream or pond that was white along the banks. The hunting parties were of paramount importance, and they were kept out to the limits of their endurance. Every man physically able to do so accompanied them. Those who could not kill game could carry it back to the caves. There was no time to spare. Already the unicorns were decreasing in numbers, and the woods goats were ranging farther and farther north. At the end of 20 days, Lake went in search of Barber and his party, worried about them. Their mission was one that could be as dangerous as any hunting trip. There was no proof that humans and Ragnarok creatures were so similar as to guarantee that food for one might not be poison for the other. It was a very necessary mission, however. Dried meat alone would bring grave deficiency diseases during summer, which dried herbs and fruits would help prevent. When he located Barber's party, he found Barber lying under a tree, pale and weak from his latest experiment, but recovering. "It was the guinea pig yesterday," Barber said. "Some little purple berries that the woods goats nibble at sometimes, maybe to get a touch of some certain vitamin or something. I ate too many, I guess, because they hit my heart like the kick of a mule." "Did you find anything at all encouraging?" Lake asked. "We found 4 different herbs that are the most violent cathartics you ever dreamed of. and a little silvery fern that tastes like vanilla-flavored candy, and paralyzes you stiff as a board on the third swallow. It's an hour before you come back out of it. But on the good side, we found 3 different kinds of herbs that seem to be all right. We've been digging them up and hanging them in the trees to dry." Lake tried the edible herbs and found them to be something like spinach in taste. There was a chance they might contain the vitamins and minerals needed. Since the hunting parties were living exclusively on meat, he would have to point out the edible herbs to all of them, so they would know what to eat should any of them feel the effects of diet deficiency. He traveled alone as he visited the various hunting parties, finding such travel to be safer each day as the dwindling of the unicorns neared the vanishing point. It was a safety he did not welcome. It meant the last of the game would be gone north long before sufficient meat was taken. None of the hunting parties could report good luck. The woods goats, swift and elusive at best, were vanishing with the unicorns. The last cartridge had been fired, and the bowmen, while improving all the time, were far from expert. The unicorns, which should have been their major source of meat, were invulnerable to arrows unless shot at short range in the side of the neck just behind the head, and at short range the unicorns invariably charged and presented no such target. He made the long, hard climb up the plateau's southern face, to stand at last on top. It was treeless, a flat green table that stretched to the north for as far as he could see. A mountain range, still capped with snow, lay perhaps 100 miles to the northwest. In the distance it looked like a white, low-lying cloud on the horizon. No other mountains or hills marred the endless sweep of the high plain. The grass was thick, and here and there were little streams of water produced by the recently melted snow. It was a paradise land for the herbivores of Ragnarok, but for men it was a harsh, forbidding place. At that elevation the air was so thin that only a moderate amount of exertion made the heart and lungs labor painfully. Hard and prolonged exertion would be impossible. It seemed unlikely that men could hunt and dare unicorn attacks at such an elevation, but 2 hunting parties were ahead of him, one under the grim Craig and one under the reckless Schroeder, both parties stripped down to the youngest, strongest men among all the rejects. He found Schroeder early one morning, leading his hunters toward a small band of woods goats. 2 unicorns were grazing in between, and the hunters were swinging downwind from them. Schroeder saw him coming and walked back a little way to meet him. "Welcome to our breathtaking land," Schroeder greeted him. "How are things going with the rest of the hunting parties?" Schroeder was gaunt, and there was weariness beneath his still lithe movements. His whiskers were an untamed sorrel bristling, and across his cheekbone was the ugly scar of a half-healed wound. Another gash was ripped in his arm, and something had battered one ear. He reminded Lake of a battle-scarred, indomitable tomcat who would never, for as long as he lived, want to relinquish the joy of conflict and danger. "So far," he answered, "you and Craig are the only parties to manage to tackle the plateau." He asked about Schroeder's luck and learned it had been much better than that of the others, due to killing 3 unicorns by a method Schroeder had thought of. "Since the bowmen have to be to one side of the unicorns to kill them," Schroeder said, "it only calls for a man to be the decoy and let the unicorns chase him between the hidden bowmen. If there's no more than 1 or 2 unicorns, and if the decoy doesn't have to run very far, and if the bowmen don't miss, it works well." "Judging from your beat-up condition," Lake said, "you must have been the decoy every time." "Well," Schroeder shrugged his shoulders, "it was my idea." "I've been wondering about another way to get in shots at close range," Lake said. "Take the skin of a woods goat, give it the original shape as near as possible, and a bowman inside it might be able to fake a grazing woods goat until he got the shot he wanted. The unicorns might never suspect where the arrows came from," he concluded, "and then, of course, they might." "I'll try it before the day's over, on those 2 unicorns over there," Schroeder said. "At this elevation, and in this gravity, My own method is just a little bit rough on a man.